Hello, it's Scott Manley here with an extra final part of Interstellar Quest. This is covering a bunch of loose ends and things that I really want to do. So, yeah, first of all, we want to actually land this spacecraft on the real scale planet Kerbal, Earth, whatever you want to call it. We don't really have a name for it. Is it Earth of the past? Is it the Earth of the future? Is it Earth of right now? Are we going to find the Kerbals in Area 51 in a future episode? Who knows, because I really haven't made that up. A lot of this story that came out of Interstellar Quest was largely made up as things happened. The whole Landber story was an interesting one because I built this nuclear-powered airplane which could essentially fly forever, and I flew it as far as the secret space center, and then I was like not that interested to continue flying it the rest of the way around the planet. And so I thought it would be funny to shoot him out of the sky with the sound of a Dalek laser weapon. Of course, that turned into a whole series of questions. Where is Landber? What happened to Landber? Will you ever return to the Landber story? After people started asking a lot, I did kind of develop this grand concept that there were actually Daleks in the Kerbal system, and they were particularly interested in the Kerbal system for their nefarious schemes because the planets had absurdly high densities, and they were going to use this somehow to manipulate space-time and take over the universe or something like that. And of course, then we would have some UFO sightings that would turn out to be Daleks, and in the end we'd probably crash some sort of spacecraft into their mothership and save the day. In the end, I just dropped that idea because it was just too much effort. I did eventually come back to Landber, obviously, with the notion that Sean's secret mission had uncovered something and had also found Landber, who had become an imposter by that point. He had had cybernetic implants and all sorts of things. He was being controlled by the alien species. But truthfully, I kept everything purposefully vague because, within the limits of my storytelling, let's say, or lack thereof, my lack of ability to write descriptive prose, or at least to make it up as I was, talking over these things, I think that anything that came out in people's minds would be vastly superior to what I could tell them or what could be rendered using the game engine. Anyway, there we have landed. I tried to detach these space capsule things. These space capsules were I originally thought they could perform re-entry on their own, but I figured that it would just be a lot easier to put everyone in the one place and then have them step off the side. Obviously, the nanovirus has affected the production lines, and for some reason they didn't include any ladders on this thing. Yes, so we plant a flag, not Kerbal. Yet, somebody should probably tell the navigation computer, right? Somebody tell the computer this. And that is, of course, Jebediah Kerman performing this very important off-world task. I also find it interesting that the clouds are moving so fast because because they're not designed for this scaled-up Kerbal. Anyway, speaking of Landber, he was last left in orbit aboard Space Lab 1. Now, he had a space capsule with parachutes, but it doesn't have any thruster system, so, well, he did devise a way to get home, of course, having hacked the systems on board the spacecraft with the help of the nanovirus or something. He used that single little engine to deorbit the entire space station. And that means he can follow the entire space station down and then detach the capsule when it's suitable. Actually, technically, he'd want to detach the capsule and get as far away from this as possible before re-entry happened. However, I thought it was far more entertaining to watch this thing tear itself apart in the atmosphere. After all, I have built several pretty extensive, pretty large objects, and throwing them into the atmosphere and watching them fall victim to the stresses of deadly re-entry and ferrum aerospace is actually quite a cathartic experience. It feels quite liberating to drop these things out of the atmosphere, to destroy them after all the hard work I put into them. This is falling down. It has the reaction, it has the stability control enabled, but Even with stability control enabled, it can only do so much, and eventually it starts flopping around like a crazy floppy thing. It's always entertaining to watch this happen here. The other drive system available was obviously the claw. I'm not sure what that was that exploded, but there will be a little more of that happening. Yeah, the spacecraft that was designed to recover the asteroids, it actually had a drive system that was quite capable, but it didn't have any parachutes. I guess he could have gone EVA and just grabbed the parachutes off of the capsule. This one means he doesn't even have to go EVA. He just, hacks the systems, and during descent he's able to try and, I don't know, he detaches something and fires something or other. Oh, there goes the telescope. I'm pretty sure its optics will not be functioning particularly well after all this. It's been, obviously, unless it's perhaps an infrared telescope or something that likes the heat. No, just kidding. Infrared telescopes, you actually want to keep them very, very cold so that they are sensitive to it. So 22 kilometers up, and we are still going fast enough to generate significant re-entry heating. The sun sets passing below the horizon, and the spinning is occasionally punctuated by explosions as parts of the spacecraft succumb to the heating, detach, and perhaps do something else, I don't know. Deploying the parachutes. Well, that's supposed to stabilize the spacecraft. These are set to open fully at about 3 kilometers up. Ditching the heat shield, this is the controls that he has available to him, but at this point he's getting a little concerned. He's having a conversation with the nanovirus. I need to lose some weight here. I'm heading towards the water, and we kind of need to get rid of some of this. How about we ditch this? And undock. Yes, drop that away. Of course, the camera decides to switch. Well, that cut his velocity to 22 meters per second, but that's probably, or it's still likely to be fatal at that velocity. Let's try ditching this. And that one. Ditching the crew capsule. That's more like it. 16 meters per second. I think Lander might just make it to the ground. Ditches that. Like he could have done in the first place, truthfully. I'm just imagining him having some frantic conversation with this, entity that is the nanovirus, and asking it to try and figure this stuff out. Obviously he has his own agenda, let's say. We don't know where he's going to be. He might be the nemesis in a future series. Who knows? But he has actually escaped from Kerbal orbit before his life support ran out. Now, the ELU probe, it, of course, was 150 days out when we left it. We can run the clock forward and actually see if it had more than enough fuel to land. And moreover, we can probably get the actual messages, the science messages from this descent. The crowdsourced science logs are actually one of the more entertaining parts of this. When you're recording and you're trying to fill airtime with interesting things, it's always fun to have somebody smarter than you that's already come up with some nuggets for you. So yeah, let's start out with the materials bay. The samples have stopped moving. You aren't sure if this is because of the cold or the time that it took to get here. The mystery goo looks like it's freezing solid. Now, of course, because I was in a rush, I was trying to do this at the same time as I'm coming down. You can see the shadow over there on the left side of the screen. ELU does not appear to be ideally composed for the generation of powerful magnetic fields. I should have got this when I was further away from ELU as well, because I wanted to get all that data. Because I didn't get it for distance space. Cold! Big surprise! And the gravioli detector says, though the surface appears to be smooth, there are fluctuations coming from beneath it. Excellent, and I am coming from above it, so that I may land on top of it and do science. Yay, you see I had plenty of delta V. Now, whether I could return to Kerbal, that is a whole other problem. On reflection, I wish I'd picked a shorter route to ELU. That was the real problem here. One of the samples goes mad and jumps out of the materials bay. He was always the weird one anyway. While the goo samples are processed, you realise that after many days, you're hungry. The goo looks all too much like the soup your grandma used to make, which is really strange because this is an automated probe. This is a robot. Do robots have grandmas that make them soup? Do robots have grandmas that make them soup that looks like the mystery goo? Perhaps the mystery goo looks like oil or old Fortran or something. The planet seems still and dead as a rock right now. A large, frozen, ice-covered rock. After a long and thoughtful evaluation of the data using knowledge of thermodynamics and various fancy methods, you determine that Eeloo is in fact far too cold to sensibly enjoy an ice cream. The planetoid has a small but significant gravitational force, perfect for extreme snowball fights. Wah! Okay, and that is the Eeloo probe. It successfully completed its mission, and then transmitted everything home, and then it sent the request. Can I go home now? I'd really like to go home. Hello? Is there anyone there? I can't hear you. Oh! Hello, Mr. Nan. Yes, I'd love to bring you on board. Now, for everything else, it's only a matter of time. With the Kerbals not there to maintain the orbits, they will slowly decay through the exosphere and magnetosphere interacting with them. So even the likes of the reactor control or the reactor power station will finally re-enter the atmosphere violently. I love how the radiators all seem to break off as soon as you pass 70 kilometers if they're destroyed. It's very interesting. It's like plucking a chicken. That's what's left when you pull away all the radiator fins. Just this, I don't know what it is, it just looks like an L-shaped. Obviously L for loser. But it continues down and things start to break up. Ooh, very nice. I mean, obviously this didn't deorbit all on its own because orbits on rails are in fact stable, presuming that they don't cross into other planets or moons' sphere of influence. But of course, in real life, objects do slowly decay. Their orbits are not stable for long periods because the Earth's atmosphere extends a lot further out than that into low orbit, and so eventually any satellite in orbit around Earth, or close enough in orbit around Earth, let's say, will eventually, their orbit will decay, desynchronize, and they will fall to Earth. This one's kind of interesting because the reactor itself has a very high density, I would imagine, and that's why the object has it sitting at the front. This thing ends up continuing to fly even in the lower atmosphere at Mach 2. It crashes at about 500 meters per second, presumably leaving a big radioactive hole in some nice green area of the Kerbal countryside. But even at that speed, it's kind of interesting to see that bits do actually fly off. Anyway, the last gratuitous re-entry, let's say, is the big one. This is the Interplanetary Lab. Obviously, this is re-entering at Joule. It's going way faster. It's much bigger. It's more fragile. It has so much more potential for crazy things to happen. Obviously, the crew is no longer in this. At least I hope they're not in this. If there's a stowaway, then, well, tough luck. Stowing away on a spaceship generally seems to be a really bad idea, given the weight, the mass margins for fuel and everything they have to work around. Well, things are getting hot anyway. The model's not sure which way it wants to face. I guess it flipped around because there's little fins on the back there, so that's got more drag. More mass towards the front, and there's things starting to explode everywhere. We're losing panels. Losing bits. Oh, this is excellent. Fuel tanks and everything flying off there. Obviously this is running at 4 times regular speed, which is why the explosions are kind of wimpy sounding. Although the frame rate looks better, the sound effects are of course now running at 4 times regular speed, and that isn't so good. Actually, it's really cool to see just how much makes it through. You can see that we've got the reactor there, that's sitting, is that going to explode? The nuclear reactor? No, not yet. Oh, there it goes, and there goes a fuel tank. Now it is pretty much an inert chunk of space debris. The reactor is gone, the fuel tanks are gone. And now, oh, bits are flying off in that direction. That's kind of interesting. And yes. And in the end, it was reduced to a bunch of canisters flying in formation. I'm guessing these were actually massless because they started to pick up velocity and travel faster, while their temperature never really increased. There was some other stuff that ended up on other orbits passing through, but yes, that was the end of the interplanetary spacecraft. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.